Ladies and gentlemen, the Grab NHL positional player rankings are back for the 2023 NHL offseason. Today, we are going to be going through every single NHL team, picking their best center and ranking them from worst all the way up to the best, to number one. But who are the best and the worst top centers in the NHL? Where does your team's top center rank? And who are my top centermen right now in the NHL? Make sure you watch till the end for every single ranking and all of the analysis, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all the time. I mean, we got banger videos like this coming out all year long. You won't want to miss a thing. Now, a lot of research and development went into this video and the rankings, so of course, as we go through, I hope you enjoy, and also let us know what you guys agree, what you disagree with, what you would change. Let us know your list as we go through it. And I'm also just ranking these players based on the last 3 seasons of play, which gives us a little bit of a disadvantage to players just breaking out in the NHL now. For instance, Jack Hughes being around the middle of the list last year and now a lot higher this year. As those younger players get further into the NHL in their careers, they'll be a lot higher, so keep that in mind. Another extremely important thing to note is that I account for the position a lot here. As a centerman, if you bring a lot of offense, that's fantastic, but if you can also back that up with great defensive play and amazing performance on the faceoff dot, it really improves your rank in this video. So now let's start off the 2023 NHL positional player rankings here, and the center list off at number 32, and the team with the worst first line center in the league. And to me, I feel kind of mean doing this because I do like this player a lot and he is still pretty young, but it's really because of the team at hand here. Let's go on to 32. Let's start out with Morgan Frost of the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, you could go Sean Couturier here, but I just think the inconsistency in health has just kind of completely ruined the last 3 years of him, really, and I just didn't really feel comfortable putting him as the best center right now. We'll see how he's able to rebound this next year at Philadelphia if he is healthy. As of right now, Morgan Frost has been their most consistent guy. At 24 years old, really saw him have a big breakout year this last season with Philly. Got 46 points in 81 games, took that big next jump, which was great to see. After some inconsistent play over the last couple of years, he's the player that still has some great talent. Could maybe be a solid second-line center, but definitely is not first-line center quality. For Philadelphia, though, they're rebuilding. They're tearing it all down. It's okay. Now let's go on from 32 to 31 here, and a player that might be rising up this list quite a bit had a huge breakout year, just like Morgan Frost this last season, in Barrett Hayton of the Arizona Coyotes. 5th overall back in 2018, and a rather slow development until really this last year. Still 23 though as a centerman, and this last year got 43 points in 82 games, was electric down the stretch. In that second half, was one of the best players on the outs. He's still getting 19 points as well. To me, he's really fascinating. Will likely still be the first line center for Arizona next year alongside Keller and Schmaltz. Had a 51% faceoff percentage as well at such a young age. That is good to see. Overall though, mature already, really improving that finishing and that offensive consistency, and that's really created a solid position for him. Still likely not going to be one of the best centers in the NHL, but developing nicely for the Yotes. Now let's go on to a team that has lost a lot of center depth this offseason. At number 30, I have Pavel Zacha of the Boston Bruins. Zacha is a weird first-line center. With Bergeron and Krejci gone, he'll be given that huge opportunity alongside Pastrnak and Marchand, and even though I think he'll float, we'll have to still wait if he'll swim. This last year was really the big coming out party for him. 57 points in 82 games on that amazing Boston Bruins team. Really getting that finishing in a lot better of a situation. And you saw 6 points in 7 games. Not too bad in the playoffs there. With Zacha, though, the faceoff dot isn't all too great for him. Around 45% this last year. And defensively is below average. Those two things kind of hold him back a little bit for me. But he likely will have a better year again this next season. Now let's go on to 29 and a young center that might not be a center for too long. I got Trevor Zegras of the Anaheim Ducks. Now, to me with Zegras, he is what he is, and he's going to be a great playmaking, offensive, creative player and a first liner for the future. Defensively and on the faceoff dot, probably not. And Leo Carlsson being drafted, I think, is a pretty big sign that Zegras will likely be played on the wing at some point, likely on that left wing. Of course, 9th overall by the Ducks in 2019. You can see this last year, point production-wise, still very solid. 65 points in 81 games, and still looking great. That playmaking is still elite. The problem is, again, 41% of the faceoff dot, and he's one of the worst younger defensive players in the league. Just not really giving much effort there, and that's really the biggest thing. As a center, and a player that likely won't be a center for too long, those things really hold him back. The offense is still great though, and still amazing, and will be elite still once it gets a little bit older too. Now let's move on to another good one. Here at number 28, I'm going to go Evgeny Kuznetsov of the Washington Capitals. Now, Kuznetsov is really weird, and this last year was just kind of painful to watch. You can see 12 goals, 55 points in 81 games after almost a point per game last year, but that finishing completely evaporated. It was just rough to watch. And defensively, he also isn't doing himself many favors. Also in the faceoff dot, 47%. Nothing remarkable there. Kuznetsov, though, offensively and passing-wise is brilliant, but I think he's a little bit one-dimensional. And just like some other players already, that does drop him down for me. Next up, let's move on to 27, and a player that was actually last place on last year's ranking, but I've grown to kind of respect a little bit more, even if his team was a disaster this last year, and that is Boone Jenner of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, as a solid power forward, Boone Jenner had a really solid season last year, taking bigger steps defensively, bringing that power forward game, and also goal-scoring-wise, looking pretty solid. 26 goals in 68 games after a good goal-scoring year last year, 45 points, but really, it's just the maturity, it's the consistency in his two-way game, and that leadership there, too. To me, Boone Jenner also amazing in the faceoff dot, 54%, and that's a big thing too. With Jenner, there's nothing amazing, there's nothing that's going to blow you away, but he's done a solid amount, and as maybe a second line center for them as Fantilli grows, he could be solid in that spot. Now let's go on to one of my favorites here of the Seattle Kraken at 26. Let's go on to my boy Matty Beniers, who had his rookie season this last year, winning the Calder Trophy and just being great all around. You can see this last year, 57 points in 80 games, 24 goals, 33 assists, and looked pretty solid in the playoffs. Half a point per game as a 20-year-old is nothing to scoff at. And I think when it comes to Matty Beniers, he's in a unique spot. Defensively, he was fantastic for Seattle this last year. Did deserve the Calder Trophy, even if people thought it was a boring pick. It was the right one, and it should have been him. It should have been him. If you don't think it was him, then I don't want to hear your opinion anymore. I'm kidding. I do love you, but he really should have been the Calder Trophy winner. But Matty Beniers also with the faceoff dot, not too great like all the younger players we talked about, 42%, but I do think he'll get better. Defensively, he is fantastic. That finishing is already proved to be NHL ready, and I think as a first-line center of the future, Beniers is going to be great for the Kraken. Now let's move on to number 25, and to me, I think a player that is extremely underrated right now still in Ryan O'Reilly, now of the Nashville Predators. At 6'1", 216 pounds, Ryan O'Reilly has been one of the most consistent players over the last few years, except for this last year with St. Louis, 19 points in 40 games, and to me, I think that's a lot of the reason why his stock is so low right now. But again, you see over the last 3 years, he's still done great things in 2023, 2022, 2021, great production, especially in 2021, a point per game in the playoffs in 2022, fantastic in the regular season and the playoffs for the Leafs, and I think that's the Ryan O'Reilly that we know. That mature game, great prowess in the defensive zone, can still do solid in terms of play driving and everything, and on the faceoff dot is one of the most consistent players in the entire league. He's a player that to me still has a lot to give, can still bring a lot to the table, and I think for Nashville will be a great leader for the future there. Next up at number 24, I'm going to go to a player that I got to be honest, I don't really know where to place on this list, and right after will be another player I have no idea where to place on this list. But next up, I have Nick Suzuki of the Montreal Canadiens. A super talented player here that has finished at an incredible rate over the last couple of years. 66 points this last year in 82 games, and is just one of the most talented finishers in the NHL right now, one of the more talented passers. He's a player that I would want to see more out of the play driving, would want to see a little bit more in the faceoff dot, 47% this last year, which I think definitely does need to get better. But I love the maturity, I love what he's done over the past 3 years still, and those 2021 playoffs, of course, still over those last 3 years, that is huge for him. And to me, Suzuki will still be a solid one for the future. We'll see how much he's able to push the needle, we'll see how much he's able to rise up this list, but I do still love the talent at hand here. Now, this one might be a little bit hot, and I'm not really sure, again, where to put this guy because he hasn't even played a single NHL game yet. At number 23, I have the Chicago Blackhawks first-line center in Connor Bedard. I mean, where do you place him, right? I mean, he's been insane. He is going to be insane. He is going to be a top 3 player in this league, but I mean, I just don't really know where to put him. I mean, I could have put him at 32 because he hadn't played any games, but I think around this range is where he would be if he played like this last year, for example. I'm not sure. I mean, Bedard is going to be a rock star. He's going to be he could be, there is a situation where he is top 5 already in like a couple years time. He is that good, and he will be rising up this list. As of right now, I'm just going to put him here. Next up, let's move on to number 22 and a really fascinating under-the-radar center here in Joel Eriksson Ek. 20th overall by the Wild in 2015 and just developing as one of the better overall centers in the league. You can see this last year taking a little bit of a jump offensively. 61 points in 78 games, 23 goals there. And with Eriksson Ek, just the defensive game, the consistency, you know what you're getting out of him every single game. He is just a leader through and through, and he's the type of player you love to have in a shutdown role. As a first-line center, though, with true first-line center upside offensively, I'm not sure if he quite has that, but he's shown some good things. And even though the face-off data is a little bit disappointing, around 49%, which you think would be a lot higher for a player like him, I do believe that will get better. But the defensive game and the improving offensive game puts him up this high. Next up, let's move on to number 21 here and the new New York Islanders first-line center in Bo Horvat, who is in a weird position for me because he's proved offensively to show a lot over the last couple of years. And this last year with Vancouver was amazing. Dried up a little bit in both the regular season and the playoffs for the Islanders, but showed a lot more defensive promise. Before that, I really don't think his defense was up to the hype and the reputation he had. Earlier in his career, I think defensively he was great, but kind of started to prioritize more of that offense, more of that goal scoring, and especially with Vancouver, defensively wasn't quite that. Face-off wise, brilliant. 56% this last year and unbelievable there. We'll see how much offense he's able to unlock with the Islanders. Maybe he reverts more as a two-way forward, but I think this is a pretty fair spot for him. Next up, let's go on to number 20, and it's still a player that I think is quite underrated considering the team he's on, and that is Tomas Hertl of the San Jose Sharks. Now, last year was a little bit of a step back defensively, but still a fantastic play driver, still a great physical presence as well. And you can see points-wise, this last year, 63 points in 79 games, hovering around that range. I don't quite see him ever getting back to that point-per-game level, especially with what San Jose is right now, but still a great offensive, simple but effective player that brings still a lot to the game with some great size and some great play driving abilities. Also great in the face-off dot too. Next up, let's move on to number 19 and the St. Louis Blues best of centerman in Robert Thomas, who's in an interesting spot right now after having a huge 2022, over a point per game, 57 assists, unbelievable season. This last year took a little bit of a step back, 65 points in 73 games, and the inconsistency started to show. There were times this season where it was dry, it was rough, there was no water to drink, you were stuck in the desert, and then there were times where you saw what he was still made of. You saw this beautiful river filled with crisp, amazing water. I don't know what metaphor I'm going for. You guys get what I mean. But finding that consistency will be a big thing. Not the greatest defensively, that does take him back a little bit, but face-off wise, he has been getting a lot better. In 2021, he was at 42%, in 2022, he was at 49%, and now he's at 52%, so that improvement is great to see. Now let's move on to number 18 here, and a player that has dropped since last year's ranking quite a bit, and that is Elias Lindholm of the Calgary Flames. Now, I think some truths with Lindholm were kind of exposed this last year. You can see the drop-off, especially in goal scoring, going from 42 goals to 22 goals. I think for Lindholm, especially that goal scoring, is pretty reliant on the playmakers he has around him. If they aren't going, then it's not going to work out, and especially considering Tkachuk and Gaudreau left, and it made it a lot worse for him. And considering Suter's system, it just wasn't a great situation all around. And I think that lack of amazing play driving was kind of blown out a little bit this last year and kind of made it a little bit worse. Still though, Lindholm does bring some great qualities, and that finishing could still be great. That passing game is still fantastic. I think this next year, hopefully if Huberdeau has a rebound season, will be much better for him. Now on to number 17. Let's start it out here with Mark Scheifele of the Winnipeg Jets. 6'3", 207 pounds, and goal scoring wise, I mean, you can see what he's done in the last few seasons. He hadn't reached 30 goals since 2019 and came out with a 42-goal season, which is really the highlight for him this last year. Defensively, still nothing really to write home about, and below average in faceoffs, under 50%. But I do think that goal scoring still brings him above a cut of the rest, and the offense is still fantastic, even if there have been some times where defensively it kind of counteracts it a little bit. Now on to number 16, and a pretty similar player here in Mika Zibanejad of the New York Rangers, though I would say is just a cut above Mark Scheifele in a couple of ways. Defensively, a little bit better, and you can see this last year, 91 points in 82 games, and in 2022, a point per game, as well as having a fantastic 2022 playoffs. For me, Mika Zibanejad up the same alley as a player like Mark Scheifele, but a little bit more consistent in his point scoring and a little bit more consistent, at least when it comes to his health too. And also playing 82 games this last year, 81 games before that, the full 56 games before that. That consistency is big. Now let's start the top 15 top centers in the NHL list out here at number 15 here with the Detroit Red Wings top center in Dylan Larkin, who just continues to get better and better as the Red Wings captain. 26 years old, and this last year is still solid production, 79 points in 80 games. Took a big step as well in the playmaking, 47 assists there. But to me, the big development has been the defensive game, especially this last year. Fantastic and carrying Detroit in a lot of different ways, not just leading the points, but the work ethic, the maturity, the leadership. It was all just an absolute load on top of Larkin that he dealt with pretty amazingly. And you also consider the face-off ability that's been getting better and better, 54% this last year, and he's developing into one of the better all-around centers in the entire league. Now on to number 14, and one of the most respected captains and centermen in the entire league in Anze Kopitar, who still turning 36 this August, is incredible in so many different ways. And even though I think that defensive game has slipped a little bit, he's really backing that up with fantastic offensive results. You can see in the past 3 years, 50 points in 56 games and 67 points in 81 games. And then this last year, a jump in goal scoring, 28 goals, 74 assists, or 74 points in 82 games, and over a point per game in the playoffs, carrying LA in a lot of ways there. And of course, he hasn't dropped down under 55% of faceoffs over the last 3 years. Kopitar is still excellent. He is still captain material through and through. And of course, that extension with LA is amazing to see. Worth every single penny for the Kings. And it's great to see him get still those paydays, even at his older age. Now let's go into another center here that is going to be rising a lot over the next couple of years, and that's Tim Stutzle of the Ottawa Senators, who is a player that you might think is a little bit low here, but to me is a player that really had that big breakout year this last season in the overall game. I mean, he was a player that was defensively starting to get a lot better after his rookie year, and now we see that goal scoring especially really rise to the occasion, 90 points in 78 games, and really just a kind of meh rookie season is what's really holding him back. 2022 was kind of more on the defensive end, but Stutzle this last year was putting it all together in a masterful way. And with Ottawa still bringing in Tarasenko, still having some options, he'll still have a lot to work with. Stutzle is going to be great this next year, going to continue to be great, and will be top 10 after next year. I can almost guarantee that. But there is obviously still room for improvement. Face-off wise, this last year was his best season, and it was at 41%. So definitely something to try to improve. Now going on to the 12th position here, and a player that will be eternally underrated, and that is Roope Hintz of my Dallas Stars. You might think he's too high, but I do not care. It is deserving, and he will get the respect that he friggin' deserves, okay? You see over the last 3 years, over a point per game in 2021, hovering around that range in 2022, above a point per game again in 2023, with an unbelievable playoffs, 10 goals, 24 points in 19 games. Great defensively, solid in the faceoff, down at 52%. One of the best skaters and best speed in the game, with great size too. And Roope Hintz is one of my most diverse, one of the most electric centers out there that play drives at an incredible rate. And Jason Robertson obviously steals the show, but a lot of what he does wouldn't be without Roope Hintz. And to me, he is a bust on that line still, deserves a lot of credit on that line still, and deserves your respect as one of the better centers in the entire league. Now, this next one might be one of my hottest takes of the video, but again, when we were talking about overall centers, bringing that defensive, bringing that face-off percentage, as well as the amazing offense, that is something I'm taking into account in this ranking, and it's something that this next player, for a lot of people, might be a lot higher in, but for me, not quite, though I still love every single thing about him. And that is Tage Thompson of the Buffalo Sabres. Now, hear me out. Offensively, one of the biggest unicorns in the NHL, does stuff that you will never see anywhere else, with his size, with the playmaking, with the just unbelievable goal-scoring spirit he has. Offensively, you aren't going to hear anything from me. He is dynamic in every single way. This last year, 47 goals, 47 assists, and for 94 points in 78 games. Just dynamic offensively. But I will still like to see a lot more development there, and there is still a lot of room to improve, in my opinion, with Tage Thompson. Defensively, he's piss poor. He puts up bad results, and that's the biggest weakness for me. Face-off percentage-wise, also, just like a Tim Stutzle, he had his best year this last year, but it was at 43%. Still not nearly what you want to see, and those are important things for me as a top center in this league. Offensively, Tage makes makes up for it in more ways than one, obviously. That's why he is still so high. But I think also another big season with that 3-year sample, you still take into account that really weird 2021. Once he has another good season, it'll be higher for sure. But I want to see the overall game improve. There's still so much more improvement in Tage that we can see, and that might be the best part. He's already so good, and I think he can also be a lot better too. Next up at number 10, and these two players were practically tied for me, Tage and Sebastian Aho of the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, Aho's not going to be nearly as electric, not going to be putting up nearly the points that Tage Thompson can. You can see this last year, still though 2 seasons over a point per game, solid in the playoffs in those 2 seasons. This last year took a dip in terms of overall production, but was still great goal scoring wise. But defensively is where I've really seen the biggest improvement in Aho's game over the last couple of years. Face-off wise, also 52%. But really the last 2 seasons, he got a bigger role in the penalty kill, but 5-on-5, he has been amazing. Never takes a shift off. He's always consistent, always knows where to be. Those smarts are just so fun to watch, and that really aids every bit of part of his game. To me, with Aho, he's not going to be nearly as flashy as some other centers, but he gets the job done in a lot of different ways. The production might not be amazing, but I think in everything that he does, he more than makes up for it, and to me is one of the better centers in the league, even if we'll see if he's still able to get over the top with Carolina, if they're able to make that next push in the playoffs. Aho needs to be a little bit better in that department. Next up now, let's go on to Stanley Cup champ, Vegas Golden Knight, Jack Eichel, coming here at number 9. And to me, Jack Eichel, I mean, you saw this last year, what he was able to do, how many haters he was able to shush. You can see what he did in the regular season and the playoffs, being a dynamic offensive leader for this Vegas Golden Knights team. But in so many ways, Eichel is just a great overall player, brought so much this last year defensively in a big role, was able to corral it, was able to handle it, and really excel in it as well. And to me, Jack Eichel was one of the best players on a Stanley Cup winning team, one of the best, if not the most consistent player throughout the whole season. Eichel deserves your flowers. He deserves the praise for how far he's come. Love to see him winning that Stanley Cup. 100% deserved. Now let's go on to number 8, another player that'll be rising up the ranks over the next couple of years, and that is Jack Hughes of the New Jersey Devils, a player that some people might say is a little bit low, but let me explain. Now, 22 years old, he's a player that, again, had that monstrous year this last season, being almost completely healthy and destroying worlds. 99 points in 78 games. And that's the type of offense that Jack Hughes always had the potential to bring. And I wasn't really too worried back in his draft year if he would bring that. It's great to see him finally getting that fully healthy season almost and just absolutely destroying. The thing is, defensively, I mean, there is still a lot of room to grow. And face-off wise, I mean, he's rocking a 35% face-off percentage this last year. To me, that's a little bit embarrassing, especially when you compare the rest of the top 10, where you have just absolute monsters on the dot. To me, that is the biggest weakness for Hughes' game, especially as a true center. At times, not really even playing center, having players like Eric Haula having to play face-off for him because he's just completely inept in that way. That needs to improve for him to be a little bit higher, but he'll continue to put that great production on him. And as he gets past that 2021, as we start to get even more great years production-wise under him, he will get higher as well. Don't worry. Next up, let's move on to number 7, and one of my favorites in Brayden Point. Just an absolute monster over the last bit for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And without that 2020, it makes it a little bit worse just with how great he was, especially in the playoffs. But you can see over the last 3 years, still great. And the production this last year took that big step forward. Even though the defense kind of took a little bit of a step back, it was fine. He scored 51 goals for Christ's sake. I mean, he got 95 points. He was still fantastic. In the playoffs the last couple of years, not exactly what you want to see, but he dealt with some injuries, especially in 2020, so we'll give him a little bit of a break for that. Still, though, that offense is great. One of the best play drivers in the entire league, one of the smartest players in the entire league, and he's a player that I just respect so much through and through, and you always just have full, complete confidence in him, and there's great reasons why. Just one of the most consistent players in the regular season and the playoffs for the last few years, and has just been a monster in that department. Next up, let's move on to number 6, and a player that a lot of people have been waiting for and waiting to actually have a downfall. Still has not reached that level yet, and that is Sidney Crosby of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Going to be turning 36 this August. That, I'm just not even going to acknowledge that anymore. That's just going to make me more sad. Anyways, turning a different age this August. You can see over the last 3 seasons, just fantastic production all the way. And 84 points in 69 games last year was insane. 10 points in 6 playoff games was unreal. And the Penguins missing the playoffs this last year was no fault of Sidney Crosby's. 93 points in 82 games was still absolutely insane. Still one of the best player drivers in the league. Still one of the best offensive players. And even though that defense is taking a little bit of a step back, but still great in the faceoffs. Still a fantastic leader. And still is going to be putting up production that you'd want to have on any NHL team. Sidney Crosby is still amazing, and he's still one of the best centers in the NHL. Next up, though, let's go on to a big riser for me and a player that is just so fun to watch every single game, and that is Elias Pettersson. Now, for some, this might be a little bit high, but this last year was just so good, I couldn't not have him here. It was just unreal to watch. And once he gets past that pretty rough 2021 where that health really took him and ruined that season for him, 2022 was great for him, a great rebound year, and this year was just purely dominant. 102 points in 80 games, one of the best defensive players in the NHL this year. And even though the faceoffs haven't yet taken that true next step, they're improving, and I think for Pettersson, he's quickly becoming one of the best overall centers in the league, one of the most consistent too, and this year was beautiful. It was every single game, almost pure dominance, and that was the talent, that was the maturity that I wanted to see him out of a full, complete season, and that's what we saw. These next few years for Pettersson are going to be unreal, and he's still 24 years old. That's insane to think about. Next up, going on to number 4 and the Stanley Cup finalist for this last year, I got Aleksander Barkov of the Florida Panthers, who has truly shown exactly what he's made of over these last 3 years. And for me, around that 2021, 2020 range, I was kind of disappointed by some of the defensive results we were seeing. He was kind of prioritizing offense a little bit more than that defense, and that defensive game kind of slipped a little bit. But I think over these last couple of years specifically, he's really shown to bring both. Last year, 88 points in 67 games, and this last year a 10-point dip, but still 78 points in 68 games, and in the playoffs 16 points in 21 games. Looked pretty just average there, but still had amazing production and was still great in the overall game. But to me, Barkov has had that reputation for his entire career of being the amazing two-way center. There was a couple years where that wasn't quite the case, but he's back to the level of amazing production and amazing defensive game, and he just had to be this high because of that. Now let's go on to a player that is really hard to track and really hard to rank right now in Auston Matthews of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, it's interesting because people, I think, have some revisionist history. Yes, in 2022, he was amazing, and he deserved the Hart Trophy, all right? Just because this last year wasn't as dominant doesn't mean that isn't true. He was like 57% face-off-wise. He was brilliant defensively. This last year, though, took that step back defensively, took that step back a little bit in face-offs, and I think that kind of soured some people on him. He's still fantastic, though. 85 points in 74 games in a down year is brilliant. A point per game in the playoffs with some big moments. Matthews is still one of the best centers in the NHL, and we'll likely see a rebound season out of him this next year, which is crazy to say. I mean, he got 85 points in 74 games last year, but he will be much better, which is pretty fun to say. We'll see. Next up, let's go into number 2, and to me, Auston Matthews and this next player are pretty much neck and neck. But at number 2, I'm going to give the slight edge to Colorado Avalanche first-line center, Nathan MacKinnon. Of course, 2022 Stanley Cup, and that is huge for him, but you just see the production over the last 3 years, brilliant when he has been healthy. And this last year, 111 points, 42 goals in 71 games, was the best 5-on-5 player in the entire league this last year, and a point per game in the playoffs, as well as 15 points in 10 playoff games in 2021, as well as that, of course, 24 points in 20 Stanley Cup winning playoff games. With Nathan MacKinnon, I do think there are some pitfalls. He's one of the best 5-on-5 players, if not the best, and offensively is one of the best behind, I would say, of course, Connor McDavid. But defensively, especially the last 2 years, hasn't been as good, and face-off-wise, he's never really been all that great. He was 45% in 2022, 44% this last year. To me, I think there are some pitfalls in the overall game, but offensively, there's no denying the powerful nature of Nathan MacKinnon. He's unreal. And then, of course, coming in at number 1, there will be no surprise for any soul on this earth that has been above a rock over the last few years. Number 1 is Connor McDavid. I mean, what do you say at this point? 153 points in 82 games. If you want any other analysis, I'm sorry. 153 points in 82 games. We're done here. And also to end things off, if you want my true top 10 centers right now, because there was one player that, because we're only going through the best center for each team, was left off. Here I have on the side, of course, I got Jack Eichel 10th, Hughes 9th, Point 8, Crosby 7, Pettersson 6, Barkov 5, Matthews 4, Draisaitl 3, MacKinnon 2, and Connor McDavid number 1. But that's going to be it for today's center ranking. Let me know down in the comments down below, because I'm sure you have thoughts. I mean, how could you not have thoughts? Look at my ranking. I want to know your thoughts down below. What do you agree? What do you disagree with my rankings? Who are your top centers in the NHL? Where would your team's top center rank? Let us know all your thoughts down below. Of course, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you enjoy the breakdown, all the rankings, because we make videos like this all the time on this channel, all year round, so you do not want to miss a thing if you enjoy hockey content just like this. And of course, make sure you share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online. Get the rankings out there and click on this card for all my hockey rankings content right in one playlist for you to binge right the heck now. Highly recommend it. Thank you guys so much for watching the first edition of the player position rankings. We're going to go through defensemen, through wingers, through goaltenders, through everything, so you will not want to miss a thing. We will see you there. Have a great day, and goodbye.